Hey folks, it's us, podcasting wonderkins John Bishop and Lucas Southworth.
Although this is a podcast about cars, it is not age appropriate for the target demographic of these films, as we usually end up talking about the reproductive organs of Lightning McQueen.
Alright, now let's take a look under the hood. Hello everybody and welcome to the Chat, the only podcast brave enough to ask a question. Hey, what's up with the cars? I'm Lucas Southworth.
And I'm John Bishop.
Nice. That was an interesting energy we brought to this one. But you know, it's season 2. We need to start experimenting a bit more with, I guess, specifically tempo of words. Is what we've decided. But yeah, thank you. Welcome to the Chat. If you didn't understand whatever I just said.
Wait, experimenting? What kind of experimenting?
Oh, nice. Robot experimenting. So you're going for?
Yeah, but
Hoping I did a better job than robot experimenting.
I had forgotten that one of the two of us is more likely to have reacted to that by making like more specifically related to the material puns.
You mean specifically related to the material?
You got that one. Nice.
John, real quick, we're going to tell you what it's about if you didn't read the title, but did you intentionally set me up with the word specific?
You'll never know.
So, almost certainly, yes. But yeah. You remember last episode when I was like, I had this idea for a series called Origins, or Origin Stories?
And then he cut out like 5 minutes of me telling him how terrible of a name that was.
Oh, if previous examples of me naming series continues, then that will not be the name that's in the title of this episode. But it's like Origin Stories.
I got bad news, Lucas. I'm pretty sure that's going to stick.
No, you need to understand that I know it's a bad name, but I don't know. Do you have a better one?
Lucas, you know I don't.
Well, then you can stop complaining about it.
I honestly, on my drive to work this morning, I did come up with like a name, but the name I came up with was just a longer version of the name, and it was Origin of Species, except it was, I somehow weaved Pacific Rim and just changed man to car. I don't know how I made it work, but I did.
Okay, if we're going to do this, let's do this. Is there a way we can make prequel work? You think on that, and I'll explain what the series is.
Did you say prequel?
Yeah, we are examining these movies as if they're prequels to Cars.
Okay.
That is the concept of these episodes, is we're looking at different movies, TV shows, maybe even like video games, or God forbid, books. Probably not books. That we think could potentially lead into the Cars universe. Basically, the Toy Story episode we did super early in the series is one of these, as well as the Vampires episode. But we didn't have a name for it yet, so now we sort of do. I don't like it, but John has thought of another one, so I'm going to throw it to John.
Cars the pre-fuel?
I'm not going to go so far to say that that's worse. I'm not sure better. It's better, though. Yeah.
Origin the pre-fuel.
That is much worse this time, so we succeeded in, I don't know, moving the needle, but maybe we can use that momentum. We'll keep thinking on it. For now, it's called Origin Stories. For now. Is there anything in stories? No, we can't. We have to do an episode of our podcast. We can't do an episode of our podcast about naming a number of episodes of our podcast. Real quick, I'm so hot. I'm going to go turn on the air conditioner because it's off and I'm very warm. Sorry, everybody.
All right, everybody, while he's gone, I'm just going to tell you something. I'm in a very strange state of mind. I'm very tired. And he said he was very hot. And my immediate reaction was to want to remove some of the blankets from my body so that he wouldn't be as hot. And I think that's a funny thing that he's going to hear when he is editing this. So there's just that. I am wearing 3 blankets, by the way.
Hey, I'm back. I'm sure John didn't do the bit where he talks about me and then pretends like he didn't now that I'm back. And if he did, I'm going to cut it out. So, bye that audio.
Wow, I'm being silenced.
Sure. But yeah, this episode specifically is about Pacific Rim. And if that could be a prequel to the Cars movies, I think we wanted to start with something that wasn't just, this has a sentient car in it. Okay. Almost certainly we're going to do episodes of this that is just, this has a sentient car in it. Okay. But this one seems like a bit more nuanced, maybe, than those.
But before we continue, I must say I've thought of 2 much worse names.
Okay, might as well.
All right, so you know how when you do a one off, sometimes people call it a one shot?
Okay.
And since we're doing Pacific Rim, I thought, oh, this could be our rim shot.
Moving on.
Well, the Italian Job is a car movie, kinda.
Is it?
It's a
I
it
haven't seen it,
heavily
so I
featured Mini Coopers in a way that made them very popular. So what if
sure.
it was just the rim job?
Hmm. Okay, moving on. Uh,
And I
John.
do want to clarify that I had to
Sure.
tell that like good 40 seconds story so that I could relinquish the trap of my mind. But that was just like a few seconds of my life where it just a few sparks connected, and I just knew that if I didn't share that, I'd have been thinking about it for about 3 hours.
Well, seeing as we're going to be recording for the next, I don't know, hour and 5 minutes, I appreciate you getting that off your mind real
Mm-hmm.
early.
Yep.
So, John, I think we should go ahead. What do you think? We should lay out what Pacific Rim is if you haven't seen it, probably. Usually we'll have like just watched these properties before we do these, but we're like super familiar with the Pacific Rim
Mm-hmm.
franchise. I feel like both of us are like really big fans of it, so we didn't do that.
Oh yeah.
John might have. I didn't do it. But yeah, Pacific Rim. It's a really good movie
Mm-hmm.
about people and big robots fighting big monsters.
Yep.
It's like
That's the movies.
yeah, the story isn't groundbreaking, but the action is so cool, and the characters are so good, and the world building is so good, and everything's so pretty, and it takes itself so like seriously. Like it's like this is, we know what this genre is, and we love it, and this is a love letter to it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And then they made the second one.
yeah, I was going to eventually get to Pacific Rim Uprising, which was a fairly disappointing follow up to it. But
Yep.
I will say, in my theories of how we get to Cars, Uprising is unfortunately important.
Oh yeah. Unfortunately, most of my theories hinge on the second movie.
Yeah, that's a shame. The second movie is basically the first movie, but with less heart. John Boyega's there, and he's a highlight of it, even though his character isn't that great, but it's John Boyega, so you're like, oh, that's cool.
He does a great job with a character that I don't like.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, actually. Charlie Day is also in it, and he's genuinely a fun time in both of the movies. So
Eh,
that's at least something.
eh, he was great in the first one.
I don't like how they chose to take his character in the second one, but he commits to the direction in a good way, I think.
Yeah,
Much like John Boyega.
he takes it the way that he should have taken it if he had to follow the storyline they were setting up.
But yeah, I mean, that's the basic of Pacific Rim. Go watch it. It's genuinely super good. But the really important part for me, like that bridges the gap from Pacific Rim to Cars, that like even made me think of this as a possibility, is the way they control the giant robots is they plug their brains into them, basically. Which
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Mm-hmm.
about you, John, but that's like the entirety of how we're going to get from Pacific Rim to Cars on my side.
You see, I could say that, Or I could say, what if you consider the second movie in which instead of people plugging into the enemy robots are just exosuits with squishy bits?
That's that's a point I was going to get to also. That in the second movie they like put, I guess, the monster brains. I guess they were monster brains uh, into the Jaegers, which are the big robots,
Mm-hmm.
and those pilot them, which makes it even more direct. But I
Mm-hmm.
was saying the very basic of it is that people put their brains in robots.
Yeah. I feel like it's just really hard for me not to get to the point of why, like, the single most disappointing thing about the second film is that
Sure.
when the robots, the enemy robots, get really overpowered, the brain spreads throughout the entire mechanism in an organic fashion and just punches holes through it, which just
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just would make it worse. You're just breaking your suit.
They do just sort of break the big robot, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, now it's better
The
somehow."
point of the robot suits was the robot suits were used to kill you, and you made a better robot suit by having your brain be directly attached to the robot suit. Why would you want to go back in the direction of having an organic body when organic body was the flaw?
Yeah. If we haven't said it, I'm going to go ahead and say we're fully going to spoil Pacific Rim 1 and 2 in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and do the wiki quote because I've sort of already beat around the bush with the wiki quote,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the title of the wiki quote this week of the week.
Give me that uh, recursive Pandora's box of the week.
Sure. This week we're going over to pacificrim.fandom.com/wiki/pacific underscore rim colon underscore uprising parentheses film. Uh, we're going down to the trivia section, and this one's a real quick one. There's just a bit of trivia that I really like that says, when asked whether or not he would return for the Pacific Rim sequel during an AMA on Reddit, Idris Elba was doubtful, considering, quote, his character died in the first one. That's it. I just enjoyed that a lot.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So, cars. We've
Cars.
laid out the basics of we have a theory in cars that they are organic beings that are sort of plugged into an exosuit, and that lines up really well with some of the Pacific Rim beats. Specifically, I want to talk about the fact that in the first Pacific Rim, they need to have two people in what they call a drift to control the Jaeger. But then
Mm-hmm.
in the second movie, they show a very small Jaeger that is able to be controlled by a single person. So any doubts about like, oh, you need two people to control it? No, if it's tiny, you don't, and cars are tiny.
All right. So I'm gonna go with my fun fact of the day. All right. So
Go for it. Yeah,
when like talking about what he wanted this movie to be, Guillermo del Toro wanted it to be what I would consider to be an 80s action movie. And that's just like this pretty lighthearted, uh, like a bit a bit more goofy and cheesy, as he describes it, incredibly airy and light feel, in contrast to super brooding, super dark, cynical summer movie. And it's supposed to have a focus on these beautiful action scenes and these beautiful giant sweeping vistas and whatnot. And it's really great because I love the fact that I think I can credit Guillermo del Toro and Pacific Rim for trying to start the bringing back of that good old 80s cheese in movies. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just like Pacific Rim, Aquaman, a little bit Shazam, but not all that much, and The Meg.
a little bit of Ragnarok.
Yeah, definitely a lot of Ragnarok. But
Yeah.
like that typical movie where the protagonist doesn't have to be angry that he's the lead in a movie. And don't get me wrong, even the lead in this movie is this like dark, broody, oh my life is terrible type of character, but it almost feels like the movie makes fun of him for it
Oh,
because
it fully does.
yeah, because again, we're obsessed with this beautiful character Idris Elba plays. And the whole point of his character seems to be, hey, I'm you, but better in every way, and this movie should be about me, but it's about you.
Yeah. And I will say one thing about it is that the main character Raleigh, is that how you say his name? He
Riley.
makes a big he makes a big point at correcting some guy, so I always feel self conscious about pronouncing his name. Is very brooding and dark until he meets like the secondary lead. Is it Mako or Mako?
It's definitely both.
Okay, the secondary lead, who is like a person he's drift compatible with, and then he just like pretty immediately brightens up and is like, "Oh, cool! I have a friend again who I can pilot a big robot with." Oh,
Hmm.
that's good, and that's I always enjoyed that a lot.
And it's great because somehow we're perfectly compatible because we're both bland, attractive main character. Ah.
And I will say, we're gonna talk about cars, I promise, but we're gonna also gush about this movie a lot.
Hmm.
I agree that they're sort of bland main characters, but for some reason I still fall in love with both of them. Like I care so much about both of them, and I
Oh yeah.
don't know why. Because I think John is right that on paper, both of them are your classic. Oh, they lost their family because of this event that's happening, and they're trying to sort of avenge them slash find a purpose through this, and they're just sort of they're very stereotypical characters, but gosh, they're just played with such love, and I love
Hmm.
them.
I think it's because honestly, these two characters are designed to have that dark, broody, oh, woe is me attitude. But in every situation where they're playing on that, in a lot of movies nowadays, that's what gives them the strength, grit, and determination. But in this movie, it's their flaw. It's the thing that's wrong with them. It's the thing that holds them back.
Yeah,
Like with him, he has to overcome his self-inflicted isolation because he loses his brother at the beginning. And with her, she wants so badly to avenge her family and to fight these giant monsters without ever coming to grips with the fact that she's been scarred since she was a child by them, and she is intensely afraid of them, and she doesn't face that until she's forced to by them drifting together. And like the dark broodiness, they have to work past it. It's not something they use as a weapon.
that's honestly, John, that's a super good way to put that. We're doing some genuine good analysis of Pacific Rim, which I didn't really expect in our Dumb Cars podcast.
Because it's such a good movie, and I feel like a lot of people
It's
think it's bad because it's cheesy, and that's I don't like it.
and it is cheesy, but that's what makes it great. We've said that 100 times. John, we're gonna talk about how they go from big robots to tiny cars. You lead us off. Go.
All right. So, in the second film, one of the main fighting robots is specifically piloted by one person because it's a much smaller robot. And the whole point of that second film is that the aliens are learning to defeat us by doing what we're doing. So if someone is able to fight that well in a smaller version with less
Okay.
dedicated power, without the split mind, the split hive mind, even of the other species, the alien race is a weird thing because, as you find out in the first movie, they're all connected mentally, even if they're different kaiju. Those kaiju are all a part of the same mind that is controlled by other aliens on a different planet.
Different dimension, even, I think.
Yeah, they have to use a rift or a rim that opens up in the Pacific Ocean. So yeah, they're going to notice in the second film, hey, we lost again. This time a lot of the new cool fighting robots were great and all, but we took a lot of those out. And then one of the robots that was most effective at fighting us was this small little one. So they're going to think, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we get smaller? And then they're going to realize that, wait a minute, humans already have millions of tiny machines that our
Yeah.
brains
Okay.
could pilot. So they're going to start doing the infection of our world because, again, the whole thing is they're trying to take our world from us after we have terraformed it to be more livable for them
By polluting it.
by polluting it,
Yeah.
which really emphasizes the whole they're all cars. In the Cars movies, they're all cars. There is just going to be so much of a greenhouse gas production from that. And as we find out in the Pacific Rim movie, that's what they eat, that's what they breathe. So the fact that they're cars and the fact that greenhouse gases would be getting worse in a world where every person is a car, that makes sense. And now you might be wondering, okay, but why do they have the same general personalities as the humans? Not a human generically, but like specific individuals. And why do they replicate our systems as they were? Like they have the same culture and all of that. Just they're car people, and that's because
Can I throw it out?
absolutely.
I'm not sure if this is where you're going, but my theory is a big point of Pacific Rim Uprising that I think you were referencing as what you don't like so much is that in the first one, Charlie Day's character connects his brain to one of like the defeated brains of the kaiju, and therefore like gains a connection with this other race of people. The result of that is in the second movie, he is the villain. That's what we were saying. We don't mind spoiling,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because it's weird and dumb, but it's canon, and that's because he retained a connection to this other, to this hive mind. But I would argue that that would go both ways in the way that he became more callous and like these creatures, connecting his brain to theirs would make them more human as well, since he is now an equal part of the hive mind.
Mm-hmm.
I think that quite possibly what has made them more human is that they've. I don't think Charlie Day's character alone is enough to do it, but I think along the way, they've probably connected more brains to their hive mind and become a mesh of human slash. There's a word for their species that I'm going to Google here in a second, but this other species, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's the same topic I was going for, but I was thinking of a very specific reason, and I was going to connect it to that good old terrible, terrible quote.
The other race are the precursors, but go ahead.
The terrible, terrible quote about, well, why do certain cars have certain personalities? And it's because that's the personality of the person that was last in the car. What my presupposition is that, okay, they learn that they can link minds with humans. They learn that they have been defeated twice, and the second time it was helped by a smaller robot. A big point of the second film, and even the first, is that these robots are trying to take over our planet, and one way to do that is to send out multiple and to like clone organic matter to make multiple of itself and to spread itself. And in the second one, it's much more about, oh, we're going to create these like seeds of our brains that we're going to plant, and they're going to grow and infect the machine. What I'm thinking is they learn that they need to do something to stop being a hive mind because they have been twice
Okay.
defeated by a significantly less advanced species with worse resources and all that, and they might think through their connection, okay, we've learned that this person was extremely unique. He was a fanatic. He had all these strange quirks that separated him, even though he was a friendly guy and he did have a good close connection with someone. So maybe what we need is to have more individuals. So, in order to spread, in order to advance, and in order to dissociate from the central hive mind, what they do is they plant seeds in cars. And what these seeds do, these brain seeds, is they wait until someone gets in the car and then they take over not only the car, but that person, fusing man and car.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that these cars in the Cars movies are a like great 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 grandchildren. What I'm saying is that these Cars movies take place less than 10 years after the aliens, the precursors, take over the entire world.
Okay, that's bold, John.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not disagreeing. That's a bold take. And I will say something that I think supports them wanting to sort of plant the seeds in the cars is a big difference between Pacific Rim 1 and 2. Pacific Rim 1, they have like no like stealth whatsoever. It's literally let's make big monsters and throw them at them until they all die. And
Mm-hmm.
what an incredible plan. But in Uprising, they've learned a lot. So they do like some sneaky sort of infiltration stuff. They make Charlie Day go crazy and
Mm-hmm.
join their side. They have him infiltrate a company and somehow secretly put their giant brains in each of the robots. I don't know how only Charlie Day by himself got their big monster brains in the robots without, I mean, these would take teams of hundreds, maybe thousands per robot, but I can't dwell on that. It happened. uh
You see, Lucas, it's really
but
simple. What they do is, uh, it's a movie.
yeah, that's 100% why. uh so and honestly they get a lot closer to winning in the second movie. I would say because like they have some plan that involves like blowing up Mount Fuji or something. Am I remembering that right?
Yes,
Okay. And they
that's
almost do
their
it, but
entire plan.
yeah, I don't know, man. But they almost do it, but then they drop a giant robot from space on them, where they throw a robot into space and drop it on them, and that's pretty cool. So they've learned that they can be more subtle, that they can do some more strategic things, and this infiltration plan of slowly and subtly without anyone noticing would sort of track on that curve that they've gone on. Like we know that full out blatant attack doesn't work. We've tried sort of a combination where we surprise them, but then our plan just comes down to attacking them in crowded cities at the end of it. So let's go full infiltration, full assimilation. I think works really well.
All right, all right, all right. Now,
I will say I do still like the humans sort of infecting the hive mind with humanity, just because I feel like that they could still cut off the hive mind because clearly Lightning McQueen and Tow Mater are not in a hive mind together. Is maybe they assimilate so many humans that the desire for individuality becomes so great that basically they get outvoted, you know? Basically
mm-hmm.
they assimilate too many humans so that the humans are the greater part of their collected mind, and they're like, no, we liked this better back when we were individuals, and they've still been corrupted into like sort of the precursor thought, so they didn't think let us be humans again, but so they stay as cars and fused with these kaiju brains, but the precursors basically get themselves out of existence because they go too far with the humans, maybe.
I can see it. I was going to argue earlier that you said they learned, and I feel like instead of that, it's more that they respect us as a race a little bit more. Because
That's
in the
fair.
first movie, it seems a lot like, oh, we sent a monster, that didn't work. It almost worked. We destroyed just a lot of civilization, and it took them a while to make robots that could fight us. Well, okay, that didn't work. We'll send a bigger one, and a bigger one, and a bigger one. And then in the second one, they're like, okay, we can't just keep sending monsters because they're making better robots. So I guess let's be sneaky. I mean, it feels beneath us, but I mean, I guess we can't really say that because they almost blew up Carl the other day with sending humans to our planet, which didn't know they could do that.
I do like that at the end of the first one, the plan does boil down to let's just throw a robot into their dimension, see how they like it. I'm tired of this. We're going to blow them up. We're going to go to their place, and then we're going to blow up them. And then they're going to stop bothering us. And they do for several years.
It's because they need to reopen the gateway, but at the same time, maybe it's just okay, let's rethink this a bit. Maybe this time we don't make a gateway that goes both ways.
One of those, why did they have an exhaust port that blew up the entire Death Star situations? Only there isn't a Rogue One to explain it.
Yep, because this movie, one of the best parts of it is that there are times where it allows itself to be a movie in a way that's like, okay, it's allowed to just be fun.
Yeah,
Why did they make robots to fight these things when they could just make these weapons that they attach to the robots and not put the robots there? It's because you want to punch a giant monster with a gigantic mechanical fist.
and one of the criticisms I always see of it is like there's a really cinematic moment where the main robot in the first one brings out a sword when it's like almost dead and immediately kills the big monster. And I see some people online going, why didn't they just use the sword from the beginning? Because it was awesome when they brought the sword out while they were in the air and cut basically Mothra in half and then fell back down. That was really cool. Are you kidding?
Because dramatic tension, I guess.
So I think our infiltration, it's what I'm going to land on is almost certainly what happened. But just to give the other side maybe a fair shake, is there a way that humans get more dependent on this technology where they can plug themselves into machinery and it's like precursors, they're dead. We beat them at the end of Pacific Rim 2 fully and finally, and since now it's becoming more and more of like easy to do this sort of drift technology, maybe they just sort of get in cars and they don't get out, you know?
Maybe. I'm thinking, okay, so one big point in the first movie is that the sale of kaiju parts is a major industry. It's an underground industry, but it's a major industry for earning money. So what happens in the second one? There's just bits everywhere. And I'm not talking about just the kaiju bits. I'm talking about the robot bits. They're just like a 2 dozen of those mechs that were made and just manufactured to be cheap yet somehow better, and they're all weirdly filled with this brain tree that somehow can now survive in our atmosphere, even though a major point of it was you have to keep it in the right atmosphere or it will dissolve pretty quickly.
True.
So clearly it's been altered to survive a lot more effectively. Like, so it probably is a bit more human. And clearly, if you interface with it, like some of the underground would be doing, you become a little less human. So I'm thinking that the underground trading and experimentation with this goop, it allows us to form more direct biological connections to technology. And
Yeah.
that's a Pandora's box where you figure out how to do something, and not only how to do it, but how to do it in a way that you can sell in a way that is advantageous. And all of a sudden, it's going to become too hot of a product for people to stop.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, the small robot that we were talking about, that as far as I know, is the first of its kind that can be piloted by a single person. Maybe it's just if they had ever made them at this scale, it would have worked fine. But it was made by just a person, like I think literally a teenager, because this movie insisted on giving us a cast of five forgettable teenagers instead of old fan favorites. But just out of like junk she found. It was very illegal, but she was able to just sort of salvage stuff from a big Jaeger fight and make her own.
Mm-hmm.
So that works perfectly for what you were saying.
Yep, she was able to use spare Jaeger parts. And here's another bone to pick: is in the first film, they established that the drift was necessary for the neural load, and it wasn't based on size because they had footage of these people and the experiments, and these people were not in Jaegers. They were just operating like one arm of the Jaeger, and all of a sudden, massive nosebleed, and they're having some sort of stroke. Like, terrible things would happen to you if you were operating any amount of Jaeger alone.
Yeah, that's a weird a weird thing they decided to do in the second one. But I mean, maybe it's just secondary protagonist from Pacific Rim Uprising who, gosh, they're all so forgettable. Maybe she just figured it out. Maybe she did it more efficiently. Maybe the fact that she was doing it so, I guess, unregulated, and the fact that time had progressed and she was putting together ideas that had already been formed for her, so she was able to experiment with them more. Maybe she just cracked it, which is a huge step forward to getting single people in single cars.
Maybe, maybe.
Yeah,
What if these people just really wanted to, like, have an emotional connection to their car? So they find a way to incorporate the alien kaiju DNA into their car, making
to make
biological
them like
cars
pets.
to make them like pets.
Oh no, no, no.
And then they want to, like, get to know their pet, so they establish a neural link or a drift with their pet. Or what if they want to be able to operate things like their house, their car, all of these things, but they don't want to have the neural load be too much, so they just make secondary brains that are supposed to be
Yeah,
blanks that help them share the neural load. So they make
Black
their
Mirror.
own, yeah, they make their own little brains, not realizing that their brain and them drifting will cause a fusion. Hmm.
Yeah, that's something that they explore, like I said, in Black Mirror all the time, is making copies of your consciousness and then putting it into technology to like operate it.
Mm-hmm.
It's truly disturbing to think about. It's one of the concepts in Black Mirror that freaks me out the most. But if they did that, clearly in Black Mirror, these copies of consciousness who are like operating your toaster and whatnot are very unhappy about it. You let them operate a car, they're gonna rise up.
I'm so bothered by the idea of that Black Mirror concept because if the technology is advanced to the point where you can replicate a consciousness, then you've gone several steps past the point when you could have just downloaded someone's preferences, and that's
Oh yeah.
all they needed to do because that's what they're for. They make copies of you so that they can know what your preferences are instead of just copying your preferences.
Yeah. And they explore it in a few different ways in later episodes of like, what if your body dies, or what if you want to see if you're truly compatible with a person. But I agree that the original of just like operating your toaster to an extent that you like is maybe a bit a bit weird that they used this. It's like using like a gun to kill a spider, kind of.
Now, Lucas, you've given me inspiration.
Okay, are you gonna shoot a spider?
You mentioned the part in Black Mirror when they upload their consciousness because they're dying,
Yeah, I was getting there.
and that's a way to live forever.
Yeah.
What if there is no human component other than the remnants of the personality because all of these people have their consciousness when they're dying just uploaded to this weird neural sharing device that takes over the world and makes cars now that are people who have died.
Yeah, I think that could work more than I want it to.
Yep, yep, yep.
Because going back to Pacific, they got the technology to put their brains in stuff. That's the whole point of why we're doing this episode. Like, they could do that if they wanted to, I guess. I guess.
Yep, 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 yep.
John, can I tell you my favorite connection that Pacific Rim explains for the Cars universe?
Go for it.
So, in Cars, there is evidence that dinosaurs existed because of the Dynaco logo being a literal dinosaur, not a car dinosaur. And they mention like fossil fuels and stuff. So we've always sort of struggled with if this is not a continuation of human society, then how did they have dinosaurs? And of course, Pacific Rim is still a continuation of human society. But in Pacific Rim, canonically, dinosaurs were kaiju the
Yep.
first time they came to Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, ah, it's not polluted enough. Let's leave, I guess.
Which, if that's the case, why were there so many?
There were a lot of dinosaurs.
You know how many
It's a weird line,
you know how many kaiju
but
they
it's
sent?
canon.
They sent maybe like 100. You wanna know how many dinosaurs there were?
More than
So
that.
many dinosaurs.
So I think that could be, if we're going with back to the cars are the precursors sort of combined with humans. They have a very distinct connection with dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
That would make them want to put the dinosaur on their logo more than like you don't really see other stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't really see like birds in logos or anything else like that. The precursors have the like they were literally dinosaurs since they shared the connection with the kaiju. Kaiju are part of the hive mind, so yeah, that's pretty cool. I like
Yep.
that a lot. I thought of that right before the episode, and I was very excited about it.
So is just to further this or clarify, are you suggesting that some of that hive mind retained some dinosaur in it? So some of the
Yes,
cars were actually part dinosaur?
I mean, well, that's a question, I guess, about just dinosaur about hive minds. I mean, if a member of the hive mind dies, does their part of the mind remain? Since it's probably spread through the mind.
In a classic hive mind, there is no part, there is
Yeah,
just
yeah, that's fair.
another one. So you have like 18 different outlets. They're all the same signal.
Yeah, I'd say before they split to individuality, the hive mind remembered being dinosaurs. So I would say each car somewhere in the back recesses of its mind, it's been so muddled by being combined with humans and like cows and stuff, since tractors are also cars, that it barely remembers it at all. But each of them has some faint memory of being a dinosaur, being
All
all the
right.
dinosaurs.
It's like every single car, if you were to ask them what's their spirit animal, their answer is probably going to be the kind of dinosaur they were.
Yeah, and they're like that's the only animal they know
Mm-hmm.
because they were them. That's oh man, what a weird throwaway line to put in your movie. That oh, the monsters here, they were the dinosaurs. Now I do this I don't think has much discussion on it, but I do want to point out that one of the questions from our Vaniverse Kari Speechel was from Rob, and he asked, when Pacific Rim happens on Car Planet, what shape are the giant robots going to be? Car shaped, forklift, humanoid? So I would like to update our answer to come on, Rob. It already happened.
Yes. And they were that shaped.
Yeah. You've seen the Pacific Rim on Cars Planet, Rob.
It was Pacific Rim.
And, unfortunately, Pacific Rim Uprising. I was watching clips of the movie to remind myself what happened in it because, like, I could honestly, if someone were to say, Lucas, tell me to the greatest degree of detail possible what happens in Pacific Rim, I would not leave out a lot. I remember that movie really well, but I was watching clips on YouTube of Pacific Rim Uprising just to sort of remember what happened. And like I remembered John Boyega's character, I remembered the annoying teenagers, but in the final battle, John Boyega looks over, and I was like, "Yeah, he's with the main annoying teenager girl, in the Jaeger, right?" There was just some guy there,
No, yeah, he's with
this some
Eastwood.
nondescript white guy who I did not remember whatsoever. Who I went back and watched more clips is apparently in the whole film very
Yeah,
important. He like trains the recruits.
like the whole thing about his character is you're supposed to dislike him because he's the stiff militaristic one of the pair, but like also not really a bad guy. He just didn't leave and he's upset that his old friend left. Like, boy howdy is he hard to remember generic white guy who I just happen to remember is blank Eastwood, son of Clint Eastwood.
Yeah, that was what sort of solidified. Like, man, I didn't really like this movie. The action is fine. I will say the biggest issue I have with the action is the Jaegers feel so like heavy in the first movie. Like you can feel like the mechanical force that is needed to move them.
I love a good mechanical feel and consideration in a movie, and that's why I had such a big problem with the second one.
They moved too fast, and it just wasn't. It was like they were made of air, like they were
Hmm.
just people running, which is not how that would work. Obviously, it wouldn't work anyway. But
Yeah, it's
if it
very
were to
upsetting.
work, it would work much more closely to the first one.
Yes, absolutely. It's I agree. It's very upsetting. Like they wanted to say, "Oh, they're the new sleek designs." And what I saw was a bunch of very generic, not unique, not character driven, not in any way the same feel they're supposed to have ripoffs of one of the models that they had in the first film.
Yep. Okay. I don't know if this is going to bear any fruit because I've thought about it for a second and I don't really have anything. But I want to throw out to you. We've talked a lot about how if this movie, if Pacific Rim and Cars were connected, how like it got from one point to the other. So like the past of Cars, if that is true,
Hmm.
what implications does Pacific Rim being a prequel to Cars have on like the Cars present and the Cars future? Like what are we not seeing maybe in the Cars movie, but that is, very much true because Pacific Rim is a prequel to them?
What was the point of the human race
It's a big question, John.
in the movies?
Oh, cool. Like why did the precursors
Yeah.
to win to just say what you're trying to say. I
Not
don't
the
know. I
goal.
don't know.
The point of them being left on there was for them to pollute, ruin, and basically destroy the atmosphere of the Earth.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
one of the most effective ways we've done that is cars, these little gas machines. So, what if the reason the cars are the way they are is because that's the most effective way they could turn the humans into more effective fuel consuming machines. Their
Okay.
whole thing is to make this race of people that they left on this planet as an infection better as an infection. So the reason that racing is such a huge industry
Yeah.
is because come on, guys, it's been another 5 years. We calculated that it should be about twice the devastation now. We're gonna make sure you, I don't know, what's something the humans used to have? NASCAR. Let's bring that back and make it a lot more intense, a lot more extreme, and just all the fuel consumption. Who are we gonna have, like, I don't know, motivate these people? Well, we can offer them, like, I don't know, a sponsorship for a fuel company.
Yeah. I like that a lot. And so in this, you're saying that maybe instead of where we got to was that they sort of fuse species, that the precursors are still totally in control. They haven't maybe fully severed the hive mind, but left the connection enough so, like Charlie Day's character, they can nudge them how they want to. So they
Hmm.
still have that connection of like, oh, maybe we should get back into racing. Oh, this is my favorite thing ever. Oh, yeah, cool.
And
So,
in order to do that, they don't have to have the hive mind per se. They could just put one of their own into the body of one of the cars. And that's why Cars 2 happens. Why is this man's plan to be wealthy off of this industry of fuel efficient, like this new fuel that's supposed to be better for the environment? Green fuel. Because he's supposed to lose. He was never supposed to win.
okay.
The bad guy was supposed to lose, and all of the things that don't make sense, no, they make sense when you think, okay, this very wealthy man can't fix himself because of some weird fatal flaw no one understands. Maybe an alien being inside of him, and he's going to ruin the reputation of his own fuel that he has spent so much time and effort making. Why would he do that? Oh, because he wants biofuel to look bad. Okay. And then why did he lose? Oh, because he was no longer necessary and we don't want the people to focus on him.
John, the implication that I like maybe Sir Miles Axelrod was genuinely like into biofuel for a long period of time, but like he was a human car,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was replaced by a precursor. That's so powerful.
I
That's
don't even want to say
so
replaced.
good.
I want to say infected. Like Charlie Day's character, Newt,
Mm,
infected. Because what happens is in the second film, his character isn't being mind controlled per se. He isn't being puppeted. He was just pushed and nudged and made to think and value things in a different, more perverted way. And that's both a pun and not a pun because it was sexual but also not sexual.
it was weirdly sexual.
Yeah. And the whole thing is he started to value that connection with his new girlfriend. And maybe it's just changing the way Sir Axelrod views his own desires and it changes how he desires things.
Yeah, I really like that, John. To a point, to a very large point. I like that it even explains him being a lemon, because we see that after Newt, Charlie Day's character, does his neural link with the kaiju and the precursors, it messes him up. He can't handle it very well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and there are like some remnants of that, if I remember right, in Pacific Rim Uprising. Like it's continued to physically affect him to a degree.
Like some
Uh,
weird discoloration of his skin, maybe a rash, and I think maybe it did something to his eye.
yes, I think so. But so so do you think all of the lemons have been pushed this way? I would say, or all of the bad guy lemons at least. I think we can allow for some naturally occurring cars who just don't work as well.
That
But
would
I would say,
that would definitely explain why they were so violent in a way that was self-damaging. Because again,
yeah, and
they don't want to be focused on. They don't want things to show up in an autopsy. They want to either win or to blow up.
yeah, and it also explains what we always saw as just sort of a flaw in the movie, and it's still a flaw in the movie since this is not true, but about how the lemons are so one dimensional when they could be doing this for such good reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they are just like, hey, we're evil and we want to ruin the reputation of biofuel.
Mm-hmm.
But if they have been so one dimensionally pushed by these otherworldly beings, that's how they would act.
And the one-dimensional nature of it, again, like there's this weird thing where when he links with the hive mind, he becomes fixated and obsessed with one thing, and it
Yeah.
was the link in that, in specifically his case, and in Sir Miles Axelrod's case, it would be the fact that he feels he's flawed and he wants other people to pay for it and he wants something like that to happen. And with the lemons, it's all about their identity. They're obsessed with being lemons, which explains why one of our best examples of copious amounts of food existing is that the lemons collect giant piles of lemons.
Yeah, they go kind of crazy in the same way that Newt Charlie Day does in Pacific Rim Uprising, and in the same way that Newt is sort of a one-dimensional, not that great villain. So are the lemons.
Mm-hmm. It's this weird twisting of what you value in a harmful and specific, oddly quirky way.
Yeah. So I want to say that in Cars 2, they still pretty much lose. Like Lightning and Mater, mostly Mater, God bless him, successfully ruin now the Precursors' plan if only because, man, that's funny. And in the first two, now in the series, they're ruined by humanity banding together and using all of their resources as a global community to fight back with all of the human spirit that we have. But in Cars 2, they didn't account for Tow Mater, did they?
They didn't account for one thing that humans have that no one else has.
Tow
Dumb,
Mater.
emphasis on dumb, luck.
And somehow, when they made Tow Mater, they just made him too darn powerful. So,
Oh,
last thing I want to get to, you're implying that if this part is true, sometime in the future in the Cars universe, the precursors come to the Cars universe and, like, finally, you did it. Okay, this is ours now.
yep.
I do. Okay. I really like the idea of they get so mad at Mater for ruining their plan. They're like, can we just send in one more kaiju? Like, I hate this tow truck so much. He ruined our good plan to make them distrust biofuel. Let's just wipe Radiator Springs off the map. And, Mater has fought a lot of weird big cars in his side adventures.
Oh no.
Now that I think about it for a second, John,
Mater's been to the Pacific Rim.
now that I think about it for a second, John, gosh darn
Remember that remember that time Mater was a taxi for one person, said I'll take you wherever you need to go, and then he drives across the bottom of the ocean
Specifically the Pacific Ocean. Yeah.
into and out of the Pacific Rim.
Oh my. I think Mater knows, and he went, okay, this happened after Cars 2. Sure, why not? Let's say that. He just took a pit stop in the Precursors dimension and was like, hey, y'all can't be doing this. And just really roughed him up. That was an unseen interlude in Tokyo Mater. The I don't know, 6 to 10 minute short about Mater learning how to drift in Tokyo.
What if the reason that Lightning can't remember any of these adventures is because Mater has to remake Lightning every time because either Lightning becomes infected by a kaiju or just killed by one. So Mater has to remake him every time.
I'll flip this around. Maybe the Precursors use their connection to be like, you can't know about Mater. Like, we can't do anything to Mater for some reason, but like, you, his best friend, have to see him as a bumbling idiot, or you'll believe him about all this stuff about us, and we can't have that happen. So we're just gonna do some rearranging in your brain real quick because this tow truck just perplexes us.
Mater trains his friend Lightning to be a godlike being with lightning powers just like him. And in Tokyo Mater, the reason you never see Lightning's powers after that is because the kaiju or the precursors do something to Lightning, which is why Mater has to go to the Pacific Rim to beat them up.
And I will say maybe all of Mater's tall tales are actually Mater training Lightning to be like his protege, because most of them involve him getting beat up a lot.
By very large, powerful beings.
And even when it's not that, it's like he's like, you can jump over this huge
With a
gap.
rocket
Like
attached to you, you know, like the
that
the
happens
the
in Pacific Rim
robots.
Uprising.
Yep. Oh
They'd
boy.
strap some big rockets to the robots and then drop them from space. Oh my gosh. Okay. I've loved this episode the whole time. The past 10 minutes have been maybe my favorite 10 minutes we've had on the show in a long time.
Oh boy. Because somehow, somehow making Pacific Rim 1 and 2 the the prequel to the Cars films makes Cars
The
2
precursor.
a much better film. Cars 2 can almost be thought of as weirdly sly and good if you take all of that into account.
If and only if you consider Pacific Rim 1 and 2 prequels to Cars, which is exactly why we're doing this series. I am a big fan of this whole series we're doing, John.
So good.
I don't think we're going to say anything better than that. You want to go ahead and end it?
Yeah, let's end it there.
Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for listening. It's a really cool thing that you did, and we appreciate it a lot. Your support means the world to us. And I will specifically say, I spent a lot of time the past few weeks just thinking on and off about different series that could be prequels to Cars. So I've thought of like a decent number of them. If you've got a good one, go ahead and send it in. I'll say we've probably got most of like there's a sentient vehicle in this one. Feel free to send them in anyway. But if you have any that are sort of like weird ones that you can still get to Cars, sort of like Pacific Rim was, God knows we're too stupid to think of them. So we would love to hear them, and you can send those to us at throwing it to John.
The chat.
Yeah,
Ka-choo.
that wasn't like as good as I thought it would. Not from any fault of yours. You just said the name of the show. Like, what else would you have done? But yeah, our Twitter is at the chat, and our email is thekachat at gmail.com. Feel free to also send us any questions you had, any comments. We want to do another full audience question episode at some point. We can't do that if you don't send us questions, so do that. And John says some other stuff, so I'm going to let him do that.
Just to further what you said earlier, if you have a favorite movie that you think would be a fun, difficult movie to connect in any way to Cars, send that one our way too, because that could be fun.
Yeah, and we would love it if you got it started for us. But if you don't want to do that, we'll try. I mean, if we can't get there, we won't do an episode on it. But
very true. All right.
Say stuff about subscribing and stuff.
Remember to like, comment, subscribe, tell anyone and everyone. Period. This is how we feed one guinea pig. We use the profits from this to feed one guinea pig.
Sure, why not? We can pretend that's true.
He's a very hungry guinea pig, even though he is imaginary.
When guinea pigs get hungry, they go, weet, 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 weet. I know this. My girlfriend lived with one. His name was Gandhi, but we called him Pig. Anyway, rest in peace, Gandhi. I assume you're dead. That's a sad note, but who cares? I'm Lucas Southworth.
And he's not dead. He'll live forever. Don't rest. You're wicked. I've been John Bishop.
Cool. Until next time, don't forget to float like a Cadillac.
And sting like a beamer.
Bless up, Gandhi. We'll never forget you.